Today is February 12th, 1985. This is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Mr. Trinidad Cantu, C-A-N-T-U, in Woodward, Oklahoma. Hey, sir, where were you born?
I was born in Devine, Texas. That's 32 miles south of San Antonio, Texas.
And when's your birthday?
November the 17th, 1922.
Who was your father?
Isaac Cantu.
And your mother?
Rafaela Pompa.
P-O-M?
P.A.
P-A. Hey, were they both from Texas?
My dad came from Mexico when he was 1 year old. And he was raised in San Antonio. In Laredo, Texas.
Yeah. And where's your mother from?
My mother was in Texas, was born in Texas.
Mm-hmm. Did your father ever talk about why the family came to Texas, or?
Well, what I understood, he was born in Texas and in Mexico, and when he was 1 year old, his dad moved to Laredo, Texas, and he was raised in Laredo.
Uh-huh. Okay. What kind of work did your father do?
He was professionally, he was a butcher. His dad owned a shop where they worked the hides, and they made things out of the hides like belts and harness and such a thing, you know, for on his days. On his days they made old saddles and out of the hides, and of course they all were butchered by profession.
Did you ever help your father in the
yes,
shop?
Yes.
What did you used to do in the shop?
I used to skin. My dad used to butcher for the whole town, Devine, and we did have a shop of our own, a slaughterhouse, and I used to help them skin and cut meat.
What, butcher what? Beef mainly?
Beef, mainly beef.
Okay. What was the name of the shop?
It was just Cantu's.
Just Cantu's shop. How big is Devine?
Devine is 3,200 population, small town.
Mm-hmm. And where did you start school?
In Devine.
Devine?
Well, I didn't finish school there because they didn't have at that time the 11th and 12th grade. So I had to drive, I used to drive the bus to San Antonio. I went to Burbank and finished high school 11th and 12th grade in Burbank in San Antonio.
And what year did you graduate?
In 1939.
In the late 30s then, did they have the old missions restored in San Antonio?
Oh yes.
San Jose? And
San Jose and of course all that historical places like the Alamo and all them.
Because I went to mariachi mass in San Jose.
Oh yes,
I enjoyed that.
It's beautiful.
Oh yeah. Okay, now is San Jose, is it a cathedral or just
It is a cathedral.
Oh, there, okay,
yes.
there's a bishop been resident. Oh, wow.
San Jose.
Oh. Okay. How did the Depression affect you and your family in the 30s?
Oh, it was real hard on us. There was 8 kids of us. Of course, I'm the third one. Got a sister, the oldest, and then a brother, then myself, and 5 more kids.
Mm-hmm.
It was real hard because I can remember when I started school, I didn't have no shoes, and it's kind of funny because Dad had enough money to buy my oldest brother a pair of sneakers, and he couldn't afford to buy me one. So of course I had to go barefooted. But at night, my brother would go to bed, take off his sneakers, and I'll put them on and try them on. And see how they felt, you know. it was really something, but my dad just couldn't afford it. There was no money, and I remember real well the Depression. It was hard on me. Of course, our kid didn't realize at that time, but I could tell Dad it was real hard on him, and of course my mama. I remember I went to school when I was young under the Depression, and if you remember, they used to make flour came on bags, and Mama used to save all them bags and make shirts for us. And of course, some of the bags had a half moon on it, and the other one had an old man. And my God, you couldn't tell where them pictures were going to appear, and sometimes on your back or sometimes, but at least we had a clean set of clothes, you know. And that's why I say it must have been kind of hard on them to save all them materials, and so we could go clean. And
How was the butcher shop in the Depression? Did it?
Oh, it went down because at that time, see, they didn't sell any more meat. The government was killing cattle on farms and giving it to the people. And Dad used to go help them and cut meat and, you know, distribute it to the people. So the shop went down, and it didn't come back until the late 40s when Dad went back again.
Did you do any work for the CCC or?
Oh yes, yes.
What'd you do for it?
I went to the CC's in 1940 and stayed a year, and I was a cook. I turned out to be a cook. So
What camp were you in?
I was in 27N and in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
What were the guys doing in that camp? What kind of work?
They were building roads, bridges, and parks, and mainly parks and gravel roads. People from all over the nation, you know.
How was the camp organized? The CCC?
Oh, it was real army type. You had leaders, you had sergeants, officers, and it was just really like army training, exercise.
Now, were the commanders of the camp, were they military?
Oh yes, they were not military. They were the leaders, of course, the officers. They were
What, reservists or?
reserves.
Okay. How many men were in your camp?
On my camp was in of course it was the main center, Albuquerque, and they had side camps all over it must have been county or something. They had camps, side camps. They had 3 side camps, and you never knew where you was going to be, probably in one side camp or the other, or in the main. I was lucky all the time I stayed on the main camp. I was second cook, and I stayed there.
What kind of meals did you cook?
Oh, from steaks up to everything, just like a regular army
So you had
camp.
you had good food?
Oh
then?
yes, it was one of the best. I made 2 stripes. I was a 2-striper, and I was making $25, $32 I went up to when I was a 2-striper, and that was big money. And I had to get out because I wanted to join the Army.
And when did you join the Army?
I joined the Army in 1943.
In Texas?
Yes, I was working then. I got out to C.C. Camp and went to work for Civil Service in Kellyfield.
What were you doing down there?
I was loading and unloading tires for vehicles and airplanes. I couldn't turn this job down because they offered me 72 cents an hour, and my gosh, that was bread and butter from my dad's table, you know. And I worked there for 1 year. In 1943, I asked the commander of the post that I wanted to join the service because all of my friends and buddies were in the service. So he let me go with one condition, that I could come back to civil service if I ever got back.
Yeah.
So I did. I went in.
Where'd you go through basic training?
I went to oh my gosh. I was it's there in Texas, about, it must have been 45 miles from San Antonio.
What, Fort Hood?
No. Oh,
Which direction?
it's north, straight north.
Was it Bergstrom? In there in Austin?
No. Stillwater.
Sweetwater?
Well, I didn't stay there anyhow long enough to finish my basic training. I volunteered for the Paratroopers, and I went from there to Fort Benning, Georgia.
What was paratrooper training like?
It's a commando type. I was one of the first ones that went to Fort Benning, Georgia. I was in Class 6. We still had British for instructors in Fort Benning, Georgia. And I was very lucky because I did have some very good trainers. There were commandos from England that they had been in battle before. And of course I made 13 jumps to qualify. And after 13 weeks, they sent me, I qualified, and they sent me to Alliance, Nebraska, where the 17th Airborne was stationed. And from Alliance, Nebraska, we got the orders in the last part of 43, that we was going to go to New York to be involved overseas. So by that time, they attached us to the 82nd Airborne Division, which is the one that was going to take us into combat. So the 17th was attached to the 82nd, which is, I was real proud to be in the 82nd because in the first place, my dad was in the 82nd before I did. Of course, it was cavalry at that time in 1917 when my dad was in the 82nd. He used to take care of the mules and horses, and chew them, and I don't know what else. He used to talk about it, but I was young then. I didn't pay all that much attention. I wish I did it now.
Did he go overseas, or did he stay in the...
No, he did. He stayed in the States all the time. But it was the 82nd, which I was just about to join in the 82nd. And of course, I knew my dad was in the 82nd. It wasn't a, a parachute outfit. At that time was just a cavalry, but since they did away with that cavalry, they made it a parachute outfit. So I went across.
Tell me about the trip across. Anything happen?
Oh yes, yes. It took us 29 days. We left Camp Shanks, and it was one of the largest convoys I ever seen. It was big. This was in the early parts of 44. And took us 29 days to go to North Ireland. We stayed in North Ireland just for a little while.
You see any German U-boats or anything?
Oh yes, we was raided a lot of times on our way from Camp Shanks across to North Ireland. Of course, nobody knew where we was going, but
Were any of the ships sank by
oh
the
yes,
U-boats?
They, excuse me.
Oh, I was going to say, were the survivors picked up by the other ships?
Yes,
or what? Yeah.
in fact, we had some of the survivors on our ship. I never forget, it was the Victory, the boat I was going across, and it was a Moroccan ship run by Moroccans. And I'll never forget the first day on, deep in the waters, and next day they got us up and we was going to eat breakfast. And I couldn't believe it when I saw my breakfast, onions and liver. We're not used to onions and liver. Oh my gosh, I couldn't eat it. I was sick, from
Seasick.
seasick, yes. And I just couldn't hack it. I couldn't eat it. So, but that's what they eat for breakfast. And finally, I guess somebody got word that we used to eat eggs and milk, and we landed in North Ireland, and we didn't stay there but I believe a month. They shipped us back to England, Nottingham, England, where we was preparing to go into combat. Of course, we knew the purpose of us was for the invasion.
So you knew the invasion was coming?
Yes, we knew it because everybody talked about it, and in June, we knew in the first part of June, that we thought that it was going to be on the 15th, but on the 3rd of June, they started getting us together, and they told us to leave everything behind. All we had to take was the pack, what we carried on our pack. So we knew we was already.
What were your thoughts at that point?
In June the 5th, I was scared. I was so scared. I didn't know if I could kill a person. I've been a Catholic all my life, and our belief, and any other religion, your belief is not to kill. But I did have the training, the ability, and the know-how, so I was a soldier 100%, I guess. I was proud of my outfit, and I knew what the purpose was, and so the hardest part was when on the 5th, We stood on the runway about 6 hours, waiting for the go-ahead. They didn't load us until, I said midnight on the 5th. And we got on a plane, we took off. It was already June the 6th at 2 o'clock in the morning when they jumped us in Normandy. And they told us in the plane that we was going to hit Normandy, and they gave us little maps where we was supposed to gather and what we was supposed to do. And they come out with the truth that if we get 40% out of the drop zone, it was going to be pretty good, because they had us outnumbered, and that all depended on the other wave that was going to hit the beach to make contact with us.
What were you going to do after you dropped? What did they tell you to do?
I was with communications. I was with radio and messenger. I was a technician, 5th grade at that time, and my duties was to get in contact with the front to the commander, back and forth. And
what did the Germans call you all?
they called us Red Devils with big pockets, because we did have big pockets on the side and on shirts. You know, we was loaded with grenades and demolition and...
Tell me about jumping, coming down. What were your...
Well, that's one thing you never get used to, jumping. I was always afraid, even though I made 129 jumps. But when you step on that door, something comes in, you know, a feeling, or I don't know what to call it. Afraid. It's fear, I guess. You call it fear, because that's one thing you never get used to, jumping. You know, well, you say, well, you made so many jumps, you ought to get used to it. But you don't. I mean, I didn't. I was afraid every time I jumped, but I jumped.
Now, jumping at night, did you see the ground? Did you know?
You can see the ground better from the up above than you can when you're on the ground.
I mean, but at night, could you see where you're going to land?
You can't judge the ground, no. No, you can't, like in the daytime, because see, the ground comes up to you. You don't come down. When you jump and you're in the air, it seems like the ground is coming up. It's funny, but that's the way it is.
Were many of the guys hurt?
Oh, yes, yes. We lost, I say, because they dropped us. Instead of, we jumped and practiced, my gosh, at 800-900 feet. And when we jumped in Normandy, they jumped us at 500 feet. Because there were so many Germans on the ground, you know, the percentage of getting hit was less if they jumped you at 500. You don't have time to just 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. You better get ready, because you're going to hit the ground. You're traveling from 17 to 22 feet per second. That's just like a sack of potato going down. Of course, you can maneuver. If you can get the time, you can maneuver, you shoot. You can go wherever you want to go. You can go backwards, you can go sidewards or forwards. You know, if you know how to handle, you shoot. But at that altitude, you don't have time to handle your shoot, because it's going to open and then you're going to hit the ground. So the Germans were real smart. I don't know how they knew, but they had a lot of stakes where we was gonna land, and I hit one of them stakes in my leg. And it went almost all the way through my calf. And that didn't stop me. I kept on until the 9th day my feet got so swollen up that they had to evacuate me back.
Okay, what did you do in those 9 days on the ground? What?
I kept on with my company until I couldn't keep up anymore.
So you were with communications then?
Yes.
And you were sitting at communications with who?
With the commander officer to the front lines.
Okay, with the main invasion force?
Yes.
When did you first make contact with the Germans? So when did you first come in contact with the Germans?
Right as soon as we hit the ground.
What happened?
Oh, to tell you the truth, I didn't know. I hesitated. I saw 3 Germans. And I hesitated there, and I looked at them, and I didn't know. I was all by myself, because everybody was scattered. And I happened to hit a ravine where it had been bombed, a big crater. And I hit the edge, and I went down, and that's when I hit the stake on my leg. And I got out of there. I pulled the stake out, and really it didn't hurt me, or I was so afraid, I guess, that I didn't pay much attention. And I crawled out, and I went to a little bush, and I saw them 3 Germans, and I could have killed them right then, but I couldn't. You know, I looked at them, and I looked at them until they spotted me, and they started shooting at me, so I had to shoot back. So I fell pretty bad, because I know I killed 2 of them, and the other one took off, and I didn't even know. I couldn't follow him, but I went to my chaplain, and I told him that. He said, well, our purpose is to get rid of them. He said, don't even think about it. It's a routine from now on. So in them 9 days, it was hell. They sent me back, and I was in the hospital for about a month, and I came back. I healed real fast anyhow, and I was sent back to my company.
In the 9 days, you were setting up communication, was this mainly landlines that you were setting up?
Yes.
Stretching wire, or?
Yes.
How far inland were you dropped?
From the beach,
Yeah.
25 miles
5 miles. How long did it take to hook up with the main invasion force?
It took us 27 days. And the first one we saw was the 4th Army. Oh, they were just like angels to us when we when we got together with them.
Okay, when you were evacuated 9 days, where were you evacuated to?
I was to Manchester, England.
So they were able to get you out there?
They flew me, because we had little cubs, and they put all they land in and out with little coppers. And I was lucky to be one of the first ones out of there. And next thing I knew, I was in England. And we was getting ready to hit Luxembourg and Belgium and
You said that you
Bastion.
were one of the battling bastards of Bastion?
Yes, I went back to the front after a month, and we was going to, they were already in Belgium when I joined them back.
Tell me about Bastion.
Bastion was really one of the toughest fights we ever had, because we didn't have no communication, we didn't have no nothing, we didn't have no cover. It was snowing, it was for 97 days. We didn't have no support from nobody. It was just a trap that we were surrounded. It was just a pocket. So some days we had ammunition, some days we didn't have it. We had to crawl back and get some of that it was behind from the bodies or somebody that had some. The weather was real bad. We was fighting the weather and we was fighting the Germans at the same time.
So tell me more about Bastion. You said that you jumped into Bastion?
We jumped in Holland, and from Holland we went to, we walked all the way.
Yeah. Okay, we were...
See, Bastion was a pocket where you couldn't come out and nobody could go in. We were surrounded. And the Germans by that time was trying to shoot everything into Bastion. But once we took it, we just held on to it, and we, like I said, for 97 days we couldn't get nobody to help us. The weather, they couldn't fly in there and drop ammunition or food or anything. The weather was so bad that they just couldn't be helped.
So were you with Patton's army then going to Bastion? Or?
Yes, Patton went around Bastion, but he didn't get into Bastion. He went to the Roe Valley, which is Central Europe. But he was, at first he was our support. You know, on one side was Patton, and we was on the west side, and he was on the east side, Patton. And he was, you know, more like a cover to us for the 82nd. That's why we covered a lot of, gosh, we walked all the way from France into Belgium, Luxembourg, into Bastion. We just stop and figure how far is that. That's a long ways, and we walked every bit of it, you know, mile by mile, fighting until we hit Bastion. We got out of there, and well, of course, the weather got better, and they didn't take any prisoners at Bastion. We didn't take any either. We couldn't afford it. We couldn't take care of our own selves, more or less prisoners, so we finally got some help. The weather got better, and that's when we started hitting to the Rhineland, which is Cologne, and went all the way down to the east side of Germany until we hit Berlin. By that time we was just chasing. After we got out of Bastion, we were just only chasing. When we hit Belgium, it's where I got wounded again, but it was a bayonet. I thought I was, when I was in Fort Benning, Georgia, I thought I was real good with the bayonet. You know, I was instructor there, and I thought I was one of the best, by God, and I don't mind saying it, but I was young, I was pretty good sized boy, and I was real good with the bayonet until I met this SS trooper in Belgium, and he taught me a lesson or two with the bayonet. He just whipped me, he just took the rifle away from me, cut my finger in two and went into my hand, and he stuck me in the stomach, and he just put his foot and pulled me out. And he made one mistake. He pulled it out and turned away from me. I had 3 bullets. We was out of ammunition. We was hand-to-hand combat. I had 3 bullets in my 45, and I managed to reach my 45. And I couldn't, this finger was gone. It grew some meat, but it was cut in half. So I grabbed my 45 and I shot at this German that whipped me. Big. He was big. He was huge. He was an SS trooper. And good. He was good with the bayonet. And I missed him. Well, I guess my finger was hurt and I was trembling and scared, I guess. And he came right back and I switched to my left hand. And I was lucky I hit him with a 45. He went up in the air and I got him. And by that time, first sergeant gave me a shot of morphine, and that's all I could remember. I was out. Next day I was back again in the hospital in England. So.
Now, did that happen at Bastion?
On the outskirts of Bastion, yes. Yes, it's.
Were you in? What about the Battle of the Bulge?
I was in the Battle of Bulge when we're just getting ready to come back to Garrison. When to rest, because we've been in front for so long. So some Patton outfit was going to relieve us, and they did. We went back. I can tell you it was in Saint Marie de Monte, in where we was going to be stationed Garrison in France to recover and gather. And we got there next day, they called us that the Battle of the Bulge was on. The Germans threw everything, we couldn't stop it. They couldn't stop it. They stopped the drive. It was a counterattack. That's when they threw everything they had at us. So the 82nd was called again back, one day in Garrison. So we went back and we managed to stop the drive, and that was the end of the Germans.
What did you do in the Battle of the Bulge? What was your?
I was, by that time I was a sergeant. I was with BAR and machine gun. I had a squad, a 14-man, and my duties was to support, all the, especially the mortars and artillery that we had. We was the gunners for it. So, and, by the way, in the Normandy, I got the Presidential Citation. The President Roosevelt decorated us with the Presidential Citation, and In Belgium, I got the Brown Star. I went on a patrol with my first sergeant and my squad leader, and we captured 88 motor and captured 89 prisoners, and we killed 21. The 81 prisoners we brought back, and on our way back, my first sergeant got hit, and I lost him, and I had my squad leader, and he got hit in the arm, so I had to take over, and I brought back the prisoners. That's when I got the Brown Star for it. And by that time, I was recommended for another presidential citation. So I did get another presidential citation. And I didn't know that my outfit at that time got bitch head, spearhead for outstanding fighting on not jump, on that invasion. We was the one who was credit for it. So I'm real proud of that.
What awards do you
head.
have? What awards do you have?
I've got 4 Brown Stars. I got the Silver Star. I got 2 presidential citations. I got 3 Purple Hearts. I was wounded twice, and the third one, they said that I didn't need it. I already had too many of them. So really, I didn't need it. I got Purple Heart with Oakley Cluster, which it covers as many times as you. That's as far as you can go. And I got unit badge, which it was $10 extra for getting that medal. And I got so many of them, I can't keep track of them. But
did you help liberate any of the concentration camps?
yes,
Before we get in. Okay. Oh, the concentration
Oh
camps.
yes, when we hit Frankfurt, we was detailed to take care of there were old Polish people, a concentration camp.
Yeah.
And we rescued them, and by that time we were just so far ahead of everybody. They made us stay back and take care of the displaced people, which it was old Polish. And we stood there about 3 months, and it helped us to recover and regroup. But then on these 3 months, I got to know a lot of Polish people, and it's funny, because I can speak 4 languages fluently, and it's it's a combination. I'm half Mexican and half Sicilian. My grandpa on my mother's side came from Sicily, way back on 1890, I believe. And they came from Sardinia, Sicily. And on my mama's side, they're Sicilians. And on my daddy's side, they're Mexicans. So I learned how to speak Italian and Spanish. And of course, English I was born, my dad and mom always spoke English. And so it was just natural. to learn the language. But Spanish always been our side language. And on my mama's side, there were Italian. So it's kind of funny to talk to one person in Italian, then turn around and talk to another person and in Spanish, and then turn right back and say it in English. Every time we go back home to San Antonio, my wife and I, she can't understand how I do it. I talk in Spanish and then in Italian, and then I translate to her in English. So.
Was there a big concentration camp there by?
Oh yes, it was big. It was. Oh, there's no telling how many people. I never knew how many displaced people we had. I say this concentrated camp was. Oh my gosh.
Was it one of the death camps? Or?
Yes, It was big.
What was your first reaction when you saw it?
We couldn't believe it. Oh, there were some of them skin and bones and walking. You couldn't help feeling sorry for them. You wanted to do something to help them, and what could you do? You couldn't just feed them and make them well right off. It's impossible. It took time, especially the women. And some of them were so skinny and they were pregnant. And I was so not detailed to take care of the pregnant woman and taking them to the medics. Even the medics was helping delivering babies. And some of them made it and some didn't. The percentage was so high that most of them died at birth, because of the conditions they were.
Malnutrition?
Yes. It was awful. I mean, we stayed there, about 3 months, like I say, and I was glad when they moved it, because there were dying people just day after day, by the bunches, not just, they were in bad shape. And we left them and we went on. And that's when the war ended.
What did you do on VE Day?
I couldn't believe it. By that time, there was Russians and Americans and British, French, Italians, and they were all together jumping up and down, and we just couldn't believe it, the war was over. So I didn't stay very long. I had so many points. I had 216 points, which I had privilege to fly back home, right off. So they sent me back, and I came right back. They sent me straight down to San Antonio, where I had a month's leave. And I went back and to Fort Sam Houston, and I got discharged. And I went back to work for Silver Service, and I stayed in Silver Service until 1962. That's when I retired, and I moved to Woodward.
How come you moved to Woodward?
I didn't like San Antonio. It's too big to raise my family. It's good school, but it's too big. I was raised there in San Antonio, close to San Antonio. And I know by that time I moved from Devine to San Antonio, and because my work was in San Antonio. And my mother and dad by that time lived in Wellington, Texas, here in the Panhandle. So I decided to move out of San Antonio.
Have you heard any stories about your mother's family coming from Sicily?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about the trip.
Well, they my great-grandpa was, I don't know, he was in some kind of a trouble in Sicily for fighting against the government. He didn't believe on what was the government was trying to do. He was one of them rebels that fought for the, you know, what he thought he was good. And the government was taking everything, and he was against it. And they thought the best thing to do is to move from Sicily and come to the United States.
When they come?
In 1890, I believe. 1890.
Did they ever talk about the boat trip?
No, whatever I heard, it's what my mama heard.
Yeah.
His grandfather talked about.
What was his name?
His name was Jim Pomperini, but they changed it when they came to the United States to Pompa, so they couldn't be traced again. But their name is Pomperini, not Pompa. So they changed it to Pompa, and when that was before my mama was born. And my mom didn't, she was born in 1989.
1889?
When she was born.
And where was she born? In Texas?
In Texas.
Yeah. Is that where the family came?
In 1898.
Yeah.
My mama was born
1898.
in 1898. Because they came 1980.
Yeah.
1990, I believe.
And your great-grandfather came to Texas then from Sicily?
From Sicily,
Yeah.
from Salerno,
Yeah,
Sicily.
up through Galveston in 1890.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my mama was born in Hutto, Texas. That's where they landed, in Hutto, Texas. That's about 50 miles from San Antonio. And then he moved, he was, my grandpa Jim
'87. My name is Joe Todd, and this is a follow-up interview with Mr. Trinidad Cantu. Mr. Cantu, I think we covered pretty much your life history, your family background, and all that. I'd like to get more about your Army experiences in basic training and paratrooper training.
Well, it's, in the first place, it was kind of hard on me because when I went to basic training, I went to Mineral Wells, Texas, Camp Walters, and first place, I didn't want the infantry. What I had, my mindset was to go in the Navy. But since Army had first choice, I went in, volunteered for the Army, and I took 13 weeks basic training, and I guess I didn't like it, but I wanted to get out of infantry, so I volunteered for the paratroopers on my last week on my basic training.
Did you know what the paratroopers were?
No, had no idea.
Why'd you volunteer for?
Because, like I said, I didn't want infantry, and end up that the paratroopers are infantry. So anyhow, I signed up for the paratroopers, and that same week I finished basic, and they sent me to Fort Bend, Georgia, where they train you for parachute.
How does your paratrooper training compare to your basic training?
Well, there's no comparison. It's paratroopers are, at that time we had instructors from England. One of the highest army that had experience on combat was the commandos. And that's what we had for, I went on class 6, one of the first classes, last part of 42. And so really we didn't know too much. I mean, the Americans didn't know too much about parachute jumping. Class 6 was one of the first ones. I only had 5 classes before me, and it was kind of hard. Everything you did was on a double and running and calisthenics, and it was kind of hard. I mean, the British were disciplined soldiers, and I guess that helped me, because by the time I got out of parachute training, I was in pretty good shape. After my basic training, which is pretty good training, but the paratroopers are outstanding. I mean, it's everything. You got to be in top shape all the time. Well, there were 300 of us, and only 197 made it.
Did they tell you what they were training you for?
Never did. Just to be a qualified jumper. Oh, we knew that it was a combat, because, well, we was keeping up with the news, but really we didn't know if we was going to go to the Pacific or to Europe. We had a pretty good idea it was Europe, but not really.
So when you left, did you have a graduation ceremony after paratrooper
Yes,
school? You got your wings?
I got my jump wings, and from there, after
Before we go on, how many jumps did you make in paratrooper?
13 jumps.
What did you think when you made that first jump?
It's the easiest jump, that first one.
It is?
You don't know what's going to happen, and you're anxious to jump. And really, you don't think too much about it, just that you're going to jump. But after you make the first jump, you know what's going to happen the second jump. And that's one of the hardest, the second time, because you know what's going to happen. And
Were there many accidents in jump school?
not really, not that many.
Did you pack your own parachute?
Yes, we did. In Fort Bend, Georgia, every jump, all 13 jumps, I had to pack my own. Of course, this is the basic, the training, that you learn how to pack your own shoes. You have classes, and then you go out into the field and start. You start from the beginning, learning how to tumble, and until the last 2 weeks you start jumping.
So, from graduation, Where'd you go?
They assigned me to the 17th Airborne, which it was in Alliance, Nebraska, where my outfit was going to be. It was the 507 Parachute Infantry. See, you got the infantry in there. I didn't know before I went to the Paratroopers. I thought it was going to be Air Corps or, you know, but it turned out that the Paratroopers are, once you jump, you're automatically infantryman. So the 507 Parachute Infantry, they're in Alliance, Nebraska. It's where I was assigned to the 1st Battalion Headquarters Company. I was assigned to communications.
And what was to be your job in that company? What was your job in the company?
Communications.
Okay, what, you carried a radio? Or what radio did you carry?
I didn't carry no radio. I was laying lines.
Okay.
I started out carrying lines from one post to another, and that was carrying messages. And,
what type of training did you have in Alliance, Nebraska?
Mostly drilling and maneuvers, bayonet, rifle, and mostly rifle, how to handle a rifle.
And you were training with the M1 or the 03?
The M1.
M1. You had the M1 then?
I had the M1.
Okay. And how long were you at Alliance?
We was in Alliance, Nebraska about 6 months. And from before we went across, we had a dedication jump, and I don't know how many we jumped, a lot of times. And then we had a dedication jump in Denver, Colorado, and it was a big, I don't even remember what the occasion was, but they jumped me with, well, not jump, with the American flag. Since I was in headquarters company, one of the first companies, 1st Battalion, I was supposed to jump with the flag. And I did jump the flag.
Now, how do you jump with the flag? What do you do?
The flag, when you jump, they tie from your chute. See, you got a reserve chute and your main chute. Of course, underneath they got a strap, and they tie the flag to both straps. Snaps. All you got to do when you're in the air is snap it and carry it in your hand, and you come down with the flag. And that's when I made a perfect landing. In fact, Paul helped me when I hit the ground, and I made a running landing. Perfect, just perfect. And somebody took a picture, and I didn't even know this, but when I went home on my leave, first thing I saw was the picture on the wall of me landing with a flag, and it had a big write-up on it.
You still have that picture?
It's a big picture before I even went overseas, and they sent it to my mother and telling her what I did, and it's really something. And of course I said, well, I hope when we go overseas I don't have to jump the flag. I want my rifle back.
So, from Alliance, Nebraska, where'd you go?
We went to Camp Shanks, New York.
And I guess this is all traveled by train, isn't it?
It's by train. It was by train.
Did you have Pullman cars in those trains? Or
No.
how'd you sleep on those trains?
Well, some of us slept on seats, and some of them had
The berths?
beds. Yeah. But I didn't. I had to sleep on my seat. And
Now, what equipment do you carry on the train?
a six-pack. I mean, a whole full pack.
Yeah.
It's a full pack. It weighs 60 pounds. You got everything that you take in combat.
Yeah.
I mean, everything.
Did you have your weapon with you when you traveled?
Yes. When you first assigned to the Army, that's the first thing you get. And you memorize the serial number. You carry that with you. You always be with you.
So what part of New York is Camp Shanks? What part of New York is Camp Shanks located?
It's on Camp Shanks. It's on the north side of New York, right along the coast.
Okay.
We didn't stay very long. We got to go to New York one time on a pass.
Tell me about that. What'd you do in that pass?
Oh, it was really something. I had never been out of Texas, and a farm boy. And of course I had some buddies with me from New York, Italians, and since I speak a little Italian, I could talk, and this, especially one, Gilbert Facina from Brooklyn, was the one that took me to New York, and we stayed overnight. And I stayed in his house in Brooklyn, and he showed me the town, real fast, but I got to see.
You go to Times Square?
Yes, I did. He took me to all them places, and
How about the Statue of Liberty?
I Statue of Liberty, we saw it.
What'd you think about that when you saw it?
Oh, really, someone like me, really, you didn't think at that time too much about the Statue of Liberty. I mean, you're so, how would I say it, out in the woods, and you don't know all that much about history, and it was until I started reading books and went to high school, then I knew. But I never thought I'd see the Statue of Liberty until I really saw it, and I said, well, it's really something. It's there, and but when I was young, I never thought about things like that. It's just like the Alamo in San Antonio. I was raised in San Antonio, and people over there don't go see the Alamo. I never did. I mean, it's there, but you don't care to go see it. And
Did you have any thoughts about the U.S. fighting against Italy in the war?
oh no, I never did. It's hard for a Mexican like me, I'm an American, all right. I knew all this time that I was born and raised in the United States, but my life was hard coming up. Like I couldn't go to school until I went to certain grade. I had to go to a private school before I could even go to school with the white people. They didn't, at that time, I went to school in 1927, the first time I went. I was 7 years old. And we had our own school. Of course, we had white teachers, but we weren't allowed to go to public school.
What was the reason?
I call it discrimination on the Mexican, the Latin people at that time. As you know, San Antonio and Texas is almost 40% Mexicans, more than white people. And I guess that's why they had their own schools and we had our own. We couldn't even leave in town. We had our own section in Devine, where I was born and raised, in the outskirts of San Antonio. They call it the Mexican town. And they used to call it Mexican town. Now the white bought lots, and they all back in but anyhow, that's the way it was in the beginning, and it was a lot of changes when I came back from overseas. People were scattered all over the town and with new houses, and even Dad had a new house. But coming up, it was kind of hard because there was 8 of us, and all 8 of us had to go to Mexican school and graduate from the 6th and then go to the public school. And they're kind of hard on you because they call you all kinds of names, and then it's just like in the Army when I first went into basic training. Basic training wasn't so bad, but parachute training was. A lot of people from different parts of the United States, and I guess some of them never seen a Mexican, and they used to call me names, and it went on until I went to Alliance, Nebraska, where I was assigned to the 507. They were rough characters. I mean, and of course the First Sergeant Michael Stankiewicz, he was real good. And I had a good friend of mine named Shelton Manning. He was my best friend. And he used to take me, and get him off my back. And until one day, Sergeant got mad at me, and he called me in the office and said, "Trinidad," he said, "I can't be your guardian for the rest of the time you're going to be with me. You're going to have to do something about it your own self. Get in shape. Start boxing. Start taking karate." And I did. And I turned out to be a pretty good boxer. I had pretty good bouts. So after that, I enjoyed it because I could whip anybody on my company. I was, from 139 pounds, I went to 190 pounds. So I was in pretty good shape, and in fact, I lost muscle on my eye boxing, broke my nose a couple of times, but I turned out to be, when I was in the Army, 3 professional fights, and did pretty good. 1, 2 out of 3. And so it was okay after I took boxing and I could defend myself, and I started reading on my rights and this and that, and oh my gosh, now everybody was good friends of mine.
That's good. So you left Camp Shanks and went to Europe.
Went to Europe.
Tell me about the trip over. And what ship were you on?
I was on the Victory, run by Moroccans. An old, cheap, beat-up tanker. It was awful. I mean, well, they loaded the whole battalion in there, 1st Battalion, and it was at night, and we got off at real early in the morning, starting the convoy. It was one of the biggest convoys they had. And first day out and say, oh my gosh, I was so sick. I was sick. And would you believe what we had for breakfast the first day? Liver and onions. And I was sick. I couldn't handle it. I said to myself, these people know about eggs and milk and but they didn't. They had onions and liver for breakfast. I just couldn't have it. Couldn't eat it. Anyhow, it took us 27 days to get to North Ireland on that convoy.
What were your sleeping quarters?
It was way down on I think it was on the bottom of that tanker. I mean, it was way deep. And every 30, 40 minutes they make you run up and come down so they can keep you in shape and take your mind off. And you just tired and sat down, and here they come again. And trying for us to do something. And we was hit a couple of times by submarines.
You say you were hit?
No, we weren't hit. We was attacked by. Our ship never was hit, but some of them did before they. In fact, because they couldn't miss it. It was one of the biggest convoys. It was big.
Any of the ships sunk?
Yeah. I believe they had one. It was hit pretty bad. But then, probably they lost some people, but not all of them.
And the survivors just taken aboard other ships?
Yes. Of course, I didn't see any of this. It was just what we heard. And rumors gets out, and they didn't want to tell us anything. But we knew we were being chased by submarines.
So you got to Northern Ireland?
We got to North Ireland, and I believe we stayed in North Ireland about a month or 3 weeks. This was supposed to be a secret, but the Germans already knew we was there. So about 2 or 3 weeks, I don't remember exactly. From there they moved us to Nottingham, England, where our base was going to be. So that was our station in Nottingham. It's really something where Robin Hood, and our headquarters was the Palace, Nottingham Palace, where Colonel Millet was stationed, and of course we were out in the woods on tents.
What was the reaction of the British people to the Americans?
It's a shame to say this, but they didn't want us there.
Why?
We couldn't talk to them, and they call us pigs, and to go home, and I don't know, they just didn't want us. They didn't want us until later on it got better, but at first, especially the soldiers. Every time we went to town, there was a big fight. Americans and the British. And even the officers, they didn't want us. Finally they realized, we was there to help them and not to fight them.
So what'd you do while you were there at Nottingham?
We trained on jumping, and I believe they knew what they were doing, but we didn't. They were getting ready. They were getting us ready for the invasion on D-Day, but of course we didn't. They jumped us 3 and 4 times a week, and the same pattern all the time, same pattern, and just advance. We didn't take anything, no objections, or anything. It's just one pattern forward.
How high were you jumping?
We jumped in, all the jumping we made in England, we made it about 900 feet.
That's pretty low for a jump, isn't it?
Well, not really. Not really, because when they jumped us in Normandy, they dropped us at 500 feet. We didn't have time to do anything, just get ready and hit the ground. Imagine you're traveling from 17 to 22 feet per second. You're traveling pretty fast.
Before we get to there, did you know that you were going to be on the invasion?
No idea. We thought we was going to go to somewhere in Italy or Sicily and replace some of the American troops over there. Mm-hmm. But I had no idea, and I asked the sergeant a few times what was the purpose there in England, and he never did. He probably knew, but never did say anything. Or he said, "Well, we're just getting ready. We're just getting ready," and that's all you knew, that you was getting ready. But for what, I don't know. We had a pretty good idea it was going to be a jump, but where, we didn't know. I don't think nobody knew where they were going to jump us until, of course, like Eisenhower and the big brass knew, but I don't think they turned it loose to the regiments or anything like that.
Were you there when the Germans were sending over those V-2 rockets?
Yes.
You ever see any of those?
Yes, we saw it in the air.
What do they sound like?
They make a funny, like a jet. When it, of course, we didn't know what a jet was at that time. We have never seen it. But we did see some jets when we jumped. And we didn't know what they were. Because we saw some planes that we couldn't.
Were they on the ground?
When we was up in the air, strafing us. And they were so fast that at that time we didn't know what a jet, no propellers, no nothing, just a zoom. And by that time Germany had jets. That V-bomb, it's exactly like a jet, exactly. And it makes the sound of a jet. got a roar to it.
The Battle of Britain, was that still going on?
Yes.
Of course, how far was Nottingham from London?
Oh, I say about 200 miles.
Of course, I understand they bombed London pretty good.
Oh, pretty good. So it's Mansfield, which it was our base. It's close to Nottingham.
So, how long were you at Nottingham?
In and out about 2 years.
And when did you first arrive there?
I believe it was in March or April 1943.
So you spent almost a year there then before the invasion.
Yes.
What'd you do there at Nottingham just in that year?
Well, mostly training. I mean, that's why I made so many jumps. By the time I got out, I had 129 jumps altogether.
Were you ever bombed by the Germans at Nottingham?
Not close to our base, but the town did, which we was about 5 miles out of town, on the outskirts.
So whenever June 6th was approaching, how did camp life change the closer the invasion came? What happened? Was there a build-up for the invasion that was noticeable?
I tell you what, we was ready to load the plane. We didn't even know where we was going.
What day was this?
June the 5th. We started out about 9 o'clock at night. We had all the packs and ready close to the plane.
Did you know this was the real thing, or you think just another maneuver?
We knew it was the real thing this time.
Okay. So was there a build-up?
Because when they told us to take all the pictures and everything out of our purse and no names, no nothing, and we weren't supposed to carry a wallet or anything. And they start passing us the flag, the American flag, saw it on our pass. We knew then that it was the real thing.
Was there a build-up to this day?
Yeah.
So you knew it was coming?
I knew it was coming, yeah. But where we was going, I had no idea. Nobody did.
What was your attitude and your thoughts at that time?
You think about it, you start saying it, well, will I come out of this, or is it going to be hard? How am I going to react in combat, or, that's the most that comes on your mind. How am I going to react on it?
What were your thoughts on death at that time?
I was young and I was single, you don't have too many. You say, well, you're there for one purpose, and you say, well, of course nobody wants to die or get hit or anything like that. But I say, well, if the good Lord gets me out of this, it'll be a miracle, because that war is hell. Mm-hmm. And even though you're young, but really, I wanted to go. I wanted to go because the rest of them didn't show any pressure or, and you want to act like they do. And especially I had a bunch of them from New York, Yankees. I tell you what, they can fight. They're good Americans, they got the goods. And you try to imitate them and be like them, and they're your friends, and it just makes it easy for you. And like my first sergeant, I was always with him, and this good buddy of mine, Shelton Manning, we were always together with him, with the first sergeant, because we was with communication. He needed anything, go this and do this, and like a dog, a rubber dog, you know, we did everything. And I did kind of like first sergeant and Michael, and he kind of liked me, and we just were good buddies. And I guess that's why I never thought so much of being, of course you're afraid, you'll never get used to it. It's just like all them jumps. That's one thing, you never get used to jumping out. Every time you jump out, you're afraid of something going wrong, because you're so high, and it's human. You got to be afraid. So when they gave us the go, we started loading. And I mean, each airplane, I was in plane number 9, I believe. The number was number 9. And each plane had 24 troopers, 2 sticks, 12 on each side, and pulling a glider behind.
What kind of airplane were you in?
We was on a C-47, and each plane had a glider behind him pulling it. Take off, and the glider was right behind him.
How much space between those airplanes? Do you know?
They had a cable. It was a long cable. That cable must have been a half a block long.
And how many men in the glider?
On the glider, I believe there were 8 soldiers in each glider.
Now, was the glider pilot, was he also an infantry soldier? Because, you know, he's going to go down with the glider.
Yeah, he's going to go down. He's got to land the glider plus 8 soldiers.
How'd they land those gliders at night?
There's, you don't have a way. Do your best.
Because you couldn't see.
You can see. Usually, they don't use the wheels. They have wheels and everything, but they say it's better to land without just a belly.
Can they see the ground though coming up?
Oh yeah.
Or if they could at night?
Yeah. Because it's funny, you don't go down, the ground comes up when you're up in the air, you're going down. And I saw a lot of them got destroyed in the air with troopers and straight, and we lost, a lot of them hit the trees, and they're made out of cardboard and just scatter all over the place.
So from Nottingham on the airplane, where'd you fly to?
Manchester.
Is that that's where you jumped off for Normandy?
That's where we loaded to go to Normandy.
What were you thinking at that time? Were you there at Manchester? The same thing, or any different thoughts, or?
We knew we were.
So this was June 5th?
June 5th. About 9 o'clock at night we got there, and we just sat around the plane about 1 o'clock in the morning. No, it was earlier than that. About 11:30 we started loading, because we jumped at 2 o'clock in the morning in Normandy.
Tell me about crossing the channel, and then had the bombardment began when you jumped?
Oh yeah, when we hit the beach of Normandy, the flags start coming in.
And how far inland did you land?
25 miles behind.
What was the noise like? Of all the
25 miles behind the enemy lines, no support, no nothing, just yourself. And then the invasion was going to hit on the beach, and you're 25. We were bait for the Germans to go chase us while they hit the beach.
That's what you were. So tell me about jumping at 500 feet.
500 feet. So they couldn't shoot at us. And they knew that the chute opened at 500 feet. But you have very little time to hit the ground and get in position and, get a good grip on your chute and try to handle it. Because you can handle a chute like you do a car if you know how, by just pulling the cords on it. Mm-hmm. But you don't have time. You count 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 and better get ready to hit the ground because you're going to hit the ground.
So you jumped, you're coming down, and just a few seconds you hit the ground.
I hit the ground.
Exactly where in France were you? Just 25 miles in from Normandy?
Just in.
Is there any towns in that area or just countryside?
There were towns, yes, but we didn't know where we was at. We had no idea.
Okay, when you were on the ground, were you supposed to get the company together?
Oh yes, we had crickets, little crickets, mm-hmm. And he'll give you one cricket, and whoever answered it was two crickets. Then you knew he was one of you. So I tried it, I could never find nobody.
So what's the first thing that happened when you hit the ground?
To get together and organize yourself.
And what happened to you? What exactly did you do when you hit?
I'll tell you what, I hit the ground and there were a cradle where it had been bombed. One of them 500-pounders, they make a cradle as big as this room and deeper than this room. And when I hit the ground, I was running and I hit the cradle. And man, I rolled down, all the way down. It was deep. So I said, well, I guess I'm safe here because I could hear the machine guns. And then I said, no, I'm a dead duck here. If they see me in there, well, all they got to do is shoot down. So I got out of that hole.
Were you injured when you hit?
Mm-hmm.
What happened?
They had sticks like that on the ground, all over the place. And I hit one of them on my leg. And it broke, and I had a piece of stick stuck in there.
How much of the stick was sticking out?
Oh, about that much, about 6 inches.
And how much was in the leg?
Pretty good size because you got two bones on your leg and it went right on between the bones. And I didn't even feel it. I know I was limping and I could feel hot on my boot, all the blood, running in but I didn't feel hurt or, real bad or anything. Until I saw the stick, I said, oh my gosh, I got it. And I tried to move it and I couldn't. I said, well, I'll just leave it there. So there were some hatches on the side of the fence. So I crawled out of the cradle and got underneath the hatches. And it was, getting daylight by that time. Then I could see more. And I just stood there for a while, feeling sorry for myself, and I said, well, I'm wounded. But really, what I wanted to do is get with my company. So I heard a cricket, and I gave him to him, and boy, he came running. And it was this Gilbert was seen at one of my buddies, and I was glad to see him. Oh my gosh, I was. So he said, well, we better get with the company. But we started moving out, and machine gun pinned us back again.
When's the first time you saw the Germans when you were on the ground?
When that machine gun pinned us down, we stood there, we sat there, we moved in the hatches, and he said, well, let's sit here for a while, let it get daylight. I said, okay. And I'll be there, and I looked to the side, and I could see two Germans. Two Germans with rifles. I said, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? So I looked back again, and there was three Germans. Another one came. I said, oh my gosh, and Gilbert was way off, and I was afraid to call him. I said, well, I'm trained to do this, by God, and I gotta do it. So I didn't know if I could shoot that person or not. So I stood there thinking about it, and I said, well, I gotta do it. So I shot at him. I know I got the first one, and then the second one. The other one turned around, and I ran back to Gilbert, and I told him what I did. And we crawled, and that was the only three close to us. So we crawled, and there was two of them there. By that time, one of the officers from 2nd Battalion came, and he had about 14 or 16 of them, and we joined them. And then he took us to that company.
How many in your company jumped?
250 on my company.
And how many got together there?
We lost 67% of our company
When they jumped?
when we jumped.
Is that dead, wounded, or both?
Both.
Both.
Dead, wounded.
Now, were you one of the casualties that they lost?
I was one of the casualties, yes. Because I stayed with them until the 9th, until my leg got, I didn't want to leave until my leg started getting, because by that time the medics got me and pulled and gave me a shot.
How big was that stake?
Not very big. They're about that big.
About an inch in diameter, so.
But they go right through you. They go, that's the purpose. They won't kill you, but they put you out of combat, and that's what they were trying to do.
Why did they have all these sticks up there? Just
In case
idea?
somebody, for that purpose.
Were they all along the coast there?
Yeah.
Okay.
All over the place, everywhere you looked, until we got out of that swamp. It was like a swamp where we jumped.
And how many in your company were killed in the jump? Any idea?
I believe the sergeant said 98 dead.
What was the cause of death of most of them?
Rifle
Rifle?
and machine gun.
Shot by the Germans?
Shot.
Were many of them killed coming down?
Not that I know of. Everybody was reporting, you know, that they made it, and not really. I don't think if they did, they got hit on the air, because they were strafing us pretty bad. So I finally made it to my company, and on June the 9th, they sent me back for a little while, and I got better, came right back.
Where were you sent to?
To Mansfield.
To England?
No, Manchester.
Okay.
Manchester.
How'd they get you out of there?
They put me on a jeep from there, and they drove me back. By that time, the invasion had already hit the beach and got with us. So everything was clear. and they carried us in jeep back to a boat, and then from a boat they took us back to England.
And how long were you in the hospital there?
Not long, but a little over a month. I was ready.
And back to the same company?
Back to the same company.
Where'd you rejoin the company?
We was in Saint-Marie-de-Mont in France, which is not very far from Fort Richmond.
So really in that month you hadn't gone very far.
Oh no, not by a big long shot.
How many more of the company had been killed at that point?
Oh, there was some of them already back with slight wounds, but really I can't tell you how many. I know most of the officers we lost, all of them. Lieutenant Todd, Captain Stevens, and I can go on, and most of the officers were
There's
killed.
a Lieutenant Todd there?
He was
killed?
a lawyer in civilian life. He was from Ohio. Nice. You couldn't get away with nothing with him.
And he was killed?
He was a lawyer, yeah. Yeah, he was killed in Normandy. Our captain was killed, Big Steve. And most of our sergeants, except the first sergeant.
There was Lieutenant Todd and Big Steve, you say. What was his name? The captain, Big Steve. What was his name?
Mike Steve.
Mike Steve?
Uh-huh. He was killed. He was our company commander, the first company. And Lieutenant Todd was my platoon leader. He was killed.
Okay, so when you rejoined the company, what happened then?
Well, I had more courage then. I was mad. I don't know, I wanted to get even, I guess. And I was more aggressive then and knew more what I was doing than before. Because you know it's them or you. And you don't take no chances then. They didn't take any of our prisoners. They couldn't afford to take any of our, and we couldn't afford to take any of their prisoners either, so therefore, you know, it's kind of bad to say something like that, but you'd be surprised what and they did, and we did, but
What happened to prisoners?
they just, if they caught us, there were very few when we first jumped on the invasion. They just lined the American people and shut them down. We found a lot of them. A lot of them. You can read in history where there was a place there before we hit in Bastion. They lined the whole company of American soldiers and shot them right there.
There's at Malmedy. Yeah. Did we do the same thing to the Germans?
After we saw what they were doing, we did. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but we did it. Why not?
War as hell.
War is hell. And when they give you an order, you're supposed to do it. They tell you what to do. Take them out in the woods, and they didn't want to cooperate or anything like that. Take them out in the woods, and you're in charge of it. You know what to do. But when we saw what they did to our troopers, or they hung them in the trees, and
They did.
They used to call us devil with the big pockets, because we had big pockets. jumpsuit with grenades. And I'll tell you what, we didn't have the experience or the know-how, but I'll tell you one thing. We gave them Germans hell. We learned the hard way, and we were good at it. I think we was real good at fighting them Germans, because they had the advantage. They'd been in war for so long. They knew how to. They had the best artillery. Them 88s could hit anything they wanted to. We couldn't, but we learned, and by God, in no time at all, we was as good as they were.
Mm-hmm. Did you know the war was over?
I didn't.
Did you know we were going to win that part?
Oh yeah, there was no doubt in our mind we was going to win it. Because I figured at that time, I said, well, with the Russians and Americans, the British, and all nations against one lonely German country, of course, we never did think anything about the Italians or the Frenchmans. We didn't pay no attention to them. But what we concentrated was on the Germans, because they knew how to do things. And back at we did it. After all them jumps, I was one of the luckiest to come out alive, and back. I'm glad I did.
Okay, you rejoined the company. And where'd you go?
We went over, I'll never forget this, by this time when I went back, it was in December. We've been fighting here and there, and then they moved us. It was the 24th, December the 24th. They loaded us on trucks. It was in Christmas.
And where were you?
We was in France, still in France. But they were getting us ready to go into Belgium. So they loaded us on Christmas Eve. I didn't even thought anything about Christmas because we was fighting. Mm-hmm. They loaded us and took us into Belgium, which is not very far from France to Belgium. And it was just another day, Christmas. That was one of the coldest days in my life when we was on New Year's Eve. Belgium is one of the coldest spots in the world. Mm-hmm. And we was in trucks, and we get straight from planes, and we jump out, and we gather up again, get in the truck, and went on, and until we got to the place where we were going to embark, and from there we started walking toward Luxembourg. And we did, the 101st did make it to Luxembourg.
Were you in the 101st?
No, I was on the 82nd.
82nd.
We went in combat. When we went in combat, when we went to Camp Shanks, right there we was assigned to the 82nd. We was on the 17th Airborne Division, but assigned. The 82nd was going to take us into combat. Mm-hmm. So, but the 101st and the 82nd were together, fighting together all the time, side by side. When we got to Belgium and Luxembourg, we went in to take Bastion, because it was the railroad
Okay, the Bulge had already broken out.
Oh yeah,
The Bulge was going on.
the Bulge was already on. So we froze right there when we took Bastion. As soon as we took Bastion, and we was in Belgium, Bastion and Luxembourg are together. And we was defending the border of Belgium, and the 101st was defending the border of Luxembourg in Bastion. It's right in the middle.
Tell me exactly what you did in the Battle of Bastion. What happened?
Well, there's nothing much to say, just we were strapped there. The worst storm hit us. Snow and ice, and there was nothing moving. We was just there. The Germans couldn't move, we couldn't move. We was on a pocket. We couldn't get no help from nobody. The air couldn't support us.
Okay, now were you in Bastion? Did you fight your way into Bastion?
We went into Bastion and out, in and out, and because Bastion is right in the middle of Belgium and Luxembourg, and we was together.
So you were not with McAuliffe then?
Yeah, we was with...
So you were surrounded by the Germans in Bastion?
In Bastion.
How did... Just what, did you try to break out, or
We couldn't.
the weather was too bad, or?
The weather was so bad. We had over 8-9 feet of snow, and
Okay, let me back up. Where were you when the Bulge broke out?
in Belgium.
In Belgium?
In Belgium.
What part of Belgium?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. We didn't. I mean, we had a bunch of towns we didn't even know where we was at. From day to day, you don't know where you're going to be.
And how did you wind up in Bastion, or why did you wind up in Bastion?
Because I was with communication, we had to communicate, and we couldn't lay lines, so we had to go walk and relay messages, or whatever we had was power, and come back to our headquarters, to the 82nd and the 101st. They had to communicate, and we was doing all the relaying by messenger.
How could you do this if you were surrounded by the Germans?
We were surrounded, but it was just a pocket. We had this pocket where we could move.
Okay. And that pocket was Bastion? Okay. Had you retreated into Bastion when the Germans broke out in the Bulge? Was there...
Yes, we did.
Hey, how far did you retreat to Bastion?
Not too far. Just, we had orders not to leave Bastion.
Yeah. Just a second. Okay.
We was ordered not to leave Bastion, to fight and defend, and if we had to fight to the last man and not leave Bastion.
When did the Bulge break out? When did the attack begin?
It was, I couldn't tell you the exact date, but that's when they made that counterattack, the Germans, and they just rolled over us. And when they hit us, that's when they started running out of gas. And they couldn't do anything because but they threw everything, and they did break the lines. But by that time, the weather was getting better, and we could get supplies from the air, and that's what we needed. Especially food and ammunition, because we was pretty low in ammunition. We had a lot of casualties with the weather, frozen feet, and we was, in fact, I don't have no toenails. I lost them all on my, but all they gave us was a little shot of alcohol, whiskey, and not circulate the blood again. But I think we come out pretty good.
Did McAuliffe really say nuts when...
Yes, that's when the Germans went in there in the pocket and they were carrying a white flag. And of course, you respect that white flag. And they wanted to talk to the colonel. That's when...
Did you see the Germans?
No, I didn't see him. I was in another part, but I heard it. That's right away what he said to the Germans. The German told him that it was better for him to surrender because he was surrounded and not lose so many soldiers, without, if he surrendered the whole company, the whole battalion. And he said, nuts. The German asked him again. He said, no. Is that your reply? He said, nuts. And that was it. He went into his little cabin. He was shaving. That's what everybody, and he got,